Welcome back. Well, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has slammed the design of the New South Wales Independent Commission against Corruption, saying it was a flawed model that's damaged innocent people. Now, the comments come as the Morrison government prepares for their own National Integrity Commission. And to delve a little bit deeper, we're joined by Ben Oquist, Executive Director at the Australia Institute. Ben, always great to have some of your time. This is an interesting one. What did you make of the Prime Minister's comments?
Yeah, good afternoon, Adrian. Well, we're having a furor of a debate over the need for a Commonwealth anti-corruption watchdog in the wake of course, the Premier of New South Wales having to resign because she chose to, because she was being investigated by the New South Wales ICAC. And it's prompted the Prime Minister, kind of in defence of his inaction in the wake of a lot of criticism that his model that he's proposed is too weak, for him to launch an assault on the New South Wales anti-corruption watchdog or the New South Wales ICAC. I'd put it this way: the reason politicians are so scared of the New South Wales anti-corruption watchdog or the New South Wales ICAC is that it's so effective. And because of that, politicians tend to criticise it. And the criticism that the Prime Minister has been making is that the New South Wales ICAC unfairly harms people's reputations. Well, one of the groups of people who complained most loudly about that New South Wales ICAC was Eddie Obeid, who actually took legal proceedings against the New South Wales ICAC and others, complaining his reputation was being unfairly harmed. We all know the end result of that. His case was thrown out, and of course he was later convicted of offences relating to corruption. So I think the reason that politicians are scared of the New South Wales ICAC is because the New South Wales ICAC is so effective.
What did you make of the former Premier Gladys Berejiklian? There was some criticism that ICAC's decision, timing around the decision wasn't ideal, and there were some reports that they can get a little bit political. I'm not sure whether that's accurate or not. Of course, it's crucial work, but what did you make? Is there any criticism for them, do you think, or the timing just shouldn't matter?
Well, they're a bit damned if they do, damned if they don't, aren't they? And I think a corruption watchdog has to be very careful not to be seen to be playing politics. It's dead right. It's not above scrutiny, and it's a free world. But an ICAC has to not be attuned to when it suits the politicians or not for their investigations to be launched, because then they really would be accused of being political. They have to call it as they see it. And having a strong anti-corruption watchdog is important at all levels of politics. We've seen a big drop in levels of trust in politics. Australia Institute survey said that over 60% of people had a low level of trust in politics and their parliament and politicians. And one way of addressing that is putting in place a robust anti-corruption watchdog, which we don't have at the federal level. Now, if we're going to save our democracy, if you like, if we're going to protect it from that erosion of public face, we need to ensure that not only does no corruption happen, it's seen not to happen. And an anti-corruption agency or watchdog with teeth is one part of effectively securing our democracy and helping rebuild some trust and faith in politics and our parliamentary processes. Politics is a necessary thing. If you believe in democracy, you believe in politics. It's how we sort out our differences without going to war. But if the public continues to lose faith in politics, they'll lose faith in democracy. And having a strong anti-corruption watchdog with teeth that can take on politicians and even deliver results that politicians don't like is a necessary step along that path.
And just finally, do you think the Morrison government, Prime Minister Scott Morrison, should be receiving a little bit more criticism or heat around some of these comments and the fact that it has been such a long period of time since it's been set up, or has that been in the spotlight enough from your perspective?
Oh, well, you've hit the nail on the head there, Adrian. It's been such a long time that the government has promised to introduce a federal anti-corruption watchdog. On the eve of the 2019 election, in December 2018, the Prime Minister stood with the then Attorney General in a big press conference to announce that they would be putting in place a Commonwealth Integrity Commission. It was largely seen as a political move to take the sting out of the debate, was gaining political mileage because they had promised an anti-corruption watchdog, and so people saw it as a bit cynical, but, you know, took the government at its word. It was a good thing. We now had bipartisan support for the Commonwealth Anti-Corruption Watchdog. But here we are, almost 3 years later, over 1,000 days later, and still no legislation even introduced to the Parliament. And then the proposal that they've come forward with, in theory, is not even an anti-corruption watchdog with teeth. It wouldn't be allowed to investigate politicians on a whistleblower's campaign. Effectively, would only be allowed to investigate corruption on the say-so of the government departments of the government it was investigating. It wouldn't be allowed to have public hearings when it came to politicians. It would be a watchdog without teeth. So the government has not only failed to bring into legislation what they promised on the eve of the last election, their proposal wouldn't even match the anti-corruption watchdogs that exist at state level already. And I think the Prime Minister is going to receive more criticism, not less, until he does bring in legislation and brings in legislation with teeth.
Ben Oquist, as always, a great pleasure to have some of your time. We'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me, Adrian.
Get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
It's no coincidence that we have a wages crisis in Australia.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.